Whenever you're ready, Joe. Oh, I start.
Yeah.
I forgot my cue. Hey, everybody. I'm Curtis Crotty.
And I'm Joe Deardorff, and we are brokers on the Crotty Group here in the city of Chicago and surrounding suburbs.
Welcome to the podcast.
Today, we've got some great stats to start the day to kind of frame the context of where the market is heading in 2023. I don't know about you, Curtis, but I think every one of my clients and everyone I come across, as soon as they hear we're brokers, they want to know what's happening in the market this year.
Are we going to crash?
We're going to do everything but crash.
All right.
We're going to stay in our lane, and we're going to hit the accelerator button.
Perfect. All right. Cover some stats.
Okay, so our MLS is called MRED, Midwest Real Estate Data. That covers the Chicago metropolitan area. They put out statistics on a weekly basis. So most of the stats for January are starting to come in. I've got some big numbers for you. So the week ending January 15th was an 11-week high. So count back 11 weeks. October, we started seeing things taper down going into the holidays. Well, we have bounced back.
And that's normal, right?
Very normal. Post-holiday boom.
Yep.
Holidays are over. People are back out. So this 11-week high in new residential purchase contracts, which was 2,451. First full week of 2023, we saw a 634% increase in open houses.
Wow.
That's a huge number.
People are back out.
People are back out. You see open houses pretty much die out any time between Thanksgiving and the end of the year. People are just too busy to see open houses, but inventory is hitting the market. With new inventory comes open houses.
Nice.
New residential listings, and this is really key to setting the stage for where the market is heading in 2023 because it has to do with inventory. New listings in MRED, which again is our MLS, began to increase as soon as the new year turned. The first week of the new year saw 2,200, almost 2,300 new listings, which is a 35% week over week increase.
All right.
Leaving us just 8% below where we were this time last year.
Spring market has hit.
It has hit, and it's almost at the same volume as where we started 2022.
Which is before interest rates started to hike.
Correct. So Curtis, tell us why that inventory is so important to setting the stage for the market.
So that kind of leads into the whole 2023 prediction question. What is going to happen now that supply is coming, now that open houses are coming? Mm-hmm. I think we also are realizing that interest rates are settling down. 2023 is going to be, I think, a similar year to 2022 in the sense that we're not going to be at pandemic levels of craziness. We're going to normalize, and I want to keyword that, normalize. We're going to normalize into a more cyclical Chicago average market. We're going to have a spring market, a summer market, a fall market, and a winter market. And I think we're going to start to see everybody be okay with where rates are coming. They're going to come down to be a little bit more of a average favorable number, one that's palatable for buyers, and that's going to help drive purchasing.
When we see inventory strong, that means people are on the move. So that means they're selling a house, they're going to be buying another house.
Sure.
So that keeps the wheels moving. It becomes a problem when it's unbalanced. And that's why we say it's normalizing now, because last year we had so many buyers and too few sellers. So we were out of balance. Abnormal. Now it's normalizing where the buyers and sellers are starting to balance each other out. And the market just works in harmony when we see that. So I'm really excited.
I think so. I think we've got a lot of opportunity in 2023. Rental prices are going to be at an all-time high and going to continue to go up. Because the demand for purchasing at high interest rates are low. Mortgagees, landlords, all of those people have higher costs. They're going to raise rents, and there's more renters out there. So rental prices are going to go up, which will drive people out of the rental market into the purchase market. What are some other things that are going to be happening in 2023?
We saw a lot of concessions in the rental market last year, and anyone who's familiar with renting in Chicago, when your lease comes up for renewal, those concessions disappear. So we're seeing a lot of renters from last year sign one-year leases, and now they're getting some sticker shock on their renewal rates into price points where you can become a buyer. Now that the market has normalized and there's more power given into the hands of buyers, meaning less competition, a little more time to go out and see places to get offers in and avoid multiple offer situations. You don't have to bring necessarily 20% down now to get your offer accepted. So we're seeing a lot of people who were pushed out of the market last year now able to say, you know what, this is going to be my year where I'm going to buy because the control is back in my hand. I'm in the steering wheel.
And I think concessions too, from a buyer standpoint, is important. We talked about renter concessions not happening as much. We are starting to see buyer concessions happen more.
100%. I absolutely love these concessions, also called closing cost credits.
Yep.
It's like a gift on closing day from the seller saying, here, I want to get this deal done. I'm going to contribute $5,000, $10,000 to your closing costs, which is just essentially $5,000 to $10,000 you get to keep in your pocket on closing day.
Or use it to buy down your interest rate. Save on that monthly payment.
That is the gift that gives month over month over month.
There you go. So with that, we went to the Gram. We asked some of our friends and followers and clients what they wanted to hear from us. So I've got a list of questions from everybody. Let's try and answer them. All right. Up first, we had a lot of interest around Airbnb. This is a huge topic in Chicago. What about Airbnb in Chicago? Is it a good idea? What are some things that investors who want to rent out as an Airbnb, what do they need to be looking for?
I tell everyone, brace yourself for not having many options in the city of Chicago. There are a lot of neighborhoods, associations, buildings that simply do not allow any type of residency for less than 6 months to a year,
right,
which would immediately eliminate what's called nightly rentals. Although you had done a few successful deals in multi-unit buildings, and that's really where the strategy lies.
I think you're right. I think because most HOA buildings in Chicago have those restrictions on short-term rentals, if you can, the best option is buy a 2 or 3 flat unit or building, and you can rent out the entire building yourself as an Airbnb. You control what the HOA restrictions are. You control the entire thing. So you will never have the HOA remove restrictions from you. You'll never have those set in place up front. So I think the easiest way to do Airbnb legally in the city of Chicago is to own a 2 or 3 flat or own a single family home. When you get into HOAs, if they don't have restrictions now, you can't guarantee that they're going to not put those in place in the future. So it's a risk that you take as an owner and as an investor.
So something to keep in mind is what areas and neighborhoods of the city are you going to find these properties? It's not going to typically be in the Loop, in the West Loop necessarily, in the Gold Coast, in River North, in Old Town. You don't typically see small multi-unit 4 or less. We're going to be looking northwest, south, southwest neighborhoods where you have more residential neighborhood feel.
Yep.
And buying power goes a lot further. You can pick up these multi-unit properties, 2, 3 unit, at a much better value, which of course makes it easier to get a return on your investment. So I like to set the stage with my clients too. These are some of the neighborhoods where we're going to have the most success finding Airbnb type properties while avoiding the restrictions.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say that avoiding the high rises in Gold Coast, River North, the Loop is a smart thing. There's always going to be an exception where you might find something, but 90 to 95% of those buildings, if it has a doorman, you're automatically out from an Airbnb perspective. They just don't allow it.
And to tell you the truth, a lot of professionally managed apartment communities now offer nightly rental suites on the Airbnb platform or similar, VRBO, et cetera. So they have kind of wedged in and taken a strong share of that market because they control the entire building, so they can make the rules in their favor, of course, because they are the building.
So go buy your own building.
It's a rental building.
There you go. Another question that came up quite a bit. If you're selling right now, what should you be expecting? It's pretty broad, but I think there's a few things we can chat about.
I have a few clients who I'm currently working with. Either they're listed or they're getting ready to list or have just recently sold. Super critical to do a very thorough market analysis of recent sales, not just over the last 12 months, but even the past 24, just to get a better perspective. Last year was an unusual year. We cannot be using last year's numbers to necessarily set the expectation for selling price this year. So I recommend looking at a broader range of data to see really where we should be listing at and how that property should look when we go to list it. It's called the 2 Ps, as I like to say, price and pictures. If it's priced right and the pictures look good, you're going to get people in your door. When you get people in the door, you start getting offers. If either one of those are off, it's going to look great online, but if the price is wrong, they're going to skip you. If the price is right, but it doesn't look good, they're going to skip you.
Yep. I think that's awesome. I think another thing as we head into 2023, days on market is going to become more prevalent, it's going to take longer to sell your home. We had some really short days on market over the pandemic, and sellers are still leaning on the fact that they're living in that reality. I think we are prepping our sellers that days on market are going to be a little bit longer. We have to be prepared to wait for the perfect match of buyer and your house.
It's also hyper local too. Like you said, it's a very, very broad, but certain neighborhoods, things are flying. I mean, I had a property sell in 4 days recently because it was priced right and it looked good. And it was in an area where this type of condo goes quick. So if you're even thinking of selling, you really have to get a hyper local perspective on what's going on in your neighborhood or on your street, even in your school district. I mean, a lot of these things can dramatically impact demand.
I think one other thing too to touch on, we are in an era post HGTV DIY. Buyers don't want the projects anymore. Buyers want to move into something that is turnkey, something that's move-in ready. They don't want to renovate the kitchen. So I'm working with my sellers to make the renovations up front so that you're that much more appealing to the limited amount of buyers that are out there looking at your property. And I think that's where our sellers are going to set themselves apart, is making their home look and present the best compared to what else is on the market.
Beginning the home sale process really starts at least 3 months in advance. And that's really the time it's going to take to properly prep your home to get it to the point it needs to be to sell for top dollar. There's a lot of great companies out there now that we work with who can actually front the cost for the renovation, and then you pay it back out of the proceeds of your sale.
I love those.
There's some really, really creative ways to get this all done in a pretty stress-free situation. And, we can definitely give advice on what's selling and what's working because we see houses all day. So we know what people are looking for and what sells.
There you go. Speaking of how long it takes for sellers to start the process, a few months prior to even listing, how long does it take for a buyer to go from the time that they start looking to the time that they're moved in? I think a lot of buyers are uncertain of when they should start and where they should start. What do you think is an average time frame for a buyer in today's market to consider?
I think it all starts at least 1 to 2 months in advance, just looking at your finances, talking with a lender, and making sure that the numbers on the back end are going to work for you and you have time to get the money where it needs to be if it's not already there. If, for example, credit, a couple things that are the nuts and bolts of actually putting together an offer on a house you like. Because if you jump right into showings too soon and you don't have your pre-approval or it's not in your best favor to get out there right away because you're going to see something you like, but you already skipped steps 1 and 2 and you jump to 3. So I think it starts at least 1 to 2 months in advance, talking with a lender, starting to work with an agent, see what neighborhoods you like, inventory. I would say on average, my buyers are working with me for about 3 months from the time we first talk to actually closing.
To closing or going under contract?
Going under contract, and then probably closing would be another 30 days there.
Got it. Yeah, I think I've also seen a pretty average contract period time of 30 to 45 days. We haven't really gotten out of that environment yet, and I think that's going to continue. But I think you're right. Buyers are usually in the pipeline, depending on how quick you are ready to move or how well you know what you want as a product. Buyers are usually out there for a minimum of 2 months. I've had some buyers that I've worked with for over a year. And those are the picky ones, but
I've had
they know what they want.
Two clients actually, they sent me a listing of exactly what they wanted. They said, this is the house. I didn't even actually know they were really looking for a house, but we went and saw it. They got pre-approved quickly. We put an offer in, got accepted, and boom, they were closed from the time we first talked about it to them getting keys in less than 2 months.
Wow.
So anything's possible.
How many showings do you recommend people as buyers go on before they make a choice? And I would say let's focus on the first-time home buyer.
First-time home buyer, we should look at least 2 to 3 neighborhoods.
Okay.
If you're in the city, unless you really know where you want to be or you have to be somewhere like geographically. I like to show clients at least 10 houses.
I think that's a good number. I think you need to see houses that you like and that you don't like so you can kind of define what works and what doesn't. I
Frame
think
it in the
at least 10.
context of budget too.
Sure.
Let's look at the high end. Let's look at the low end. Let's look at some in the middle. Let's look at a fully renovated. Let's look at a fixer upper. Let's kind of like set the quadrants on the square, so to speak. You know, we'll get your four corners, and then ideally we'll find kind of something in the middle that works for you.
Nice.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. All right. Next question. Should I buy a home before selling my old one? This is extremely particular to your own situation. I think if you are a seller who can afford to buy the next house before you sell, great, good for you. You were awesome as a saver. You made good choices with your money. I don't think the average American can go and buy a second house without selling their first house. And I think that if you try and line those up to a certain day, it is going to be the most stressful day of your life. It's also going to be a pretty stressful transaction to get from point A to point B. If something goes wrong with the sale, it's going to affect the purchase. So what I tell my sellers and buyers who are doing those at the same time, if you need to sell to buy, try and make the sale happen a week or 2 weeks before you move in or close on the purchase, so that you have some wiggle room that you can breathe in if the buyer of your first house has to extend things. I think, too, we're also seeing an environment in 2023 where home sale contingencies are coming back. It was very hard to get those accepted a while back. So home sale contingencies are a thing now. But again, try not to do them on the same day. If you have to sell and buy on the same day, it's going to be stressful.
There's ways to do it. People do it all the time. But there are some strategies to avoid that.
Totally.
And make sure that you're protected too. Last thing you want is to be losing the house of your dreams because of maybe a little bit of poor planning in the beginning. And that's why it's so important to know right out the gate what your options are.
On that point, being protected in a transaction, as a buyer, what kind of protection do buyers have when they sign a contract and go under? So I took this question as, what kind of contingencies do we have in place for buyers so that they know they're doing their due diligence, they have room to back out if needed? What are those kinds of steps along the way that we have set in place?
So I like to go back to this word contingencies. And I know when I was first buying and getting into real estate, that word just seems so foreign to me. And I think we toss it around, and sometimes it's safe to assume not everyone even understands what a contingency is in a contract.
Yep.
And what does that actually mean? So that means in order for your contract to actually consummate,
Yep.
all these contingencies are kind of like check boxes that have to be checked off. And if you can't check one of them, the contract is void.
Nice.
So we have some things built into a standard contract. There's many contracts out there that agents use. One is the multi-board 7.0, it's called. It's used all over. And there's a lot of contingencies already built into there that are just kind of plug and play. One huge common one, of course, is the home inspection.
Yeah.
You have your mortgage contingency. You have an HOA contingency. Tell me more about the HOA contingency. That sounds weird.
Your HOA contingency is really more about being able to review and do your due diligence on the HOA, their finances, and what's happening in that building. So when you go under contract, the attorney that you have will request a whole load of documentation from the HOA. That's going to show the HOA's approved budget. It's going to show any kind of meeting minutes that they've had over the last 12 months. It's going to show, there's a document called the 22.1 disclosure, which kind of outlines all of the key points that a buyer might need to know about that building. So once you get those, the templated version of the contract allows for a 5-day period to review everything. If there's something that is unagreeable in that, say you have a 150-pound dog and the building only allows for 30-pound dogs, you actually have a contingency in place to cancel the contract based on that fact. So the HOA contingency is one that a lot of people kind of overlook or don't think about. It does not happen at the same time as the attorney review contingency and the inspection contingency. So you also have what we call AI, attorney review and inspection. And that happens right when you go under contract. It essentially allows for your attorney to look at the contract, make sure that things are in your favor as a buyer. And then you also have that 5-day period to have an inspection done.
It's kind of like checkpoints, as I tell my buyers. You know, we get under contract, we're going to hit these certain checkpoints. So the first You immediately go into attorney review. That's the first checkpoint. During attorney review, you have your home inspection. And if a contract's going to die, it usually happens during the first 5 days in attorney review. You don't like the inspection results, or there's some other element of the contract that you guys disapprove of, and it's kind of like dead on arrival, essentially. And that happens. It definitely does
More
happen.
than you might think. Yeah.
If you get past that first checkpoint, you still have if it's an HOA, your HOA review, and you have your mortgage contingency. Those are, unless you're doing cash. There's a few other ones. If you're doing, like you mentioned earlier, home sale or home close, those could be contingencies written in. If it's a land deal, if you're buying land, there's a contingency that you get a survey that you approve of
Yep.
the land.
Yeah, there's a whole slew. I think those are the main few.
And this is really where an agent will come in, and our job is to have our client's best interest. So if a lot of times in a competitive marketplace, the first thing you have to give up as a buyer are contingencies. Your get out of jail free cards, essentially. You have to kind of hand those over if you want to get the deal, because it shows you're a more serious buyer. Well, the market's changing a little bit, and we can kind of keep some of those cards, close to our chest, and have more opportunities to back out. Every buyer likes to know, when can I back out?
There you go.
So what happens, let's say the contract does cancel during a contingency, but I already put up $10,000 of earnest money.
That's interesting, and it depends on...
Please tell me I get it back.
Well, it depends on when you canceled. So
Oh,
for the
dear.
most part, as a buyer, if you've put earnest money down and you cancel the contract within one of the contingencies that you have, your earnest money comes back to you, and it's fully refundable. So a lot of buyers are scared to put that money up front.
Mm-hmm.
Most contracts in the regular world of real estate, they have contingencies built in to make sure that you keep those. If you cancel the contract because you changed your mind and you've already met all of your contingencies, that earnest money can likely be held by the seller.
Yeah, that's pretty much their damages, essentially, for holding this house for you for all this time and then
Right.
backing
They've
out.
got to get something out of it.
And that really can happen if, let's say, you get a clear to close, but you haven't actually signed the paperwork yet, and then you just disappear and you don't come to the closing table. You're
Which
out
has
of
happened
contingencies,
before.
so you already passed all your checkpoints, and
You're on
you
the
are
hook.
committed. You are on the hook. Yeah. Once you get that clear to close, you better show up at the closing
Right.
table.
All right, I think we've got time for one more. What is some most common things that pop up during an inspection? Or what are some of the things that we as realtors hate to see pop up on inspections?
I can almost come into an inspection with a buyer with a list of things that I know we're going to
It's
see.
going to happen.
Because they happen on everyone. And now I tell my sellers, make sure we do a few of these things, because I guarantee you they're going to show up on a home inspection.
Right.
Some of them are just so random. Like, go into your closet at home and look up at the light in your closet. If there's no globe over your light, if it's just an open light bulb just on your ceiling, inspector's going to call that out right away. And he's going to say,
that's a red safety flag. It's not even like
Yep.
an inspection issue. It is a fire hazard.
he's going to say, oh, you stack up all your sweaters on there. You think it's all nice and neat, but you leave your light on. What happens when that sweater is touching that?
The entire building burns down.
But if you have a globe over the light, it's
You're
safer.
safe.
It is solid advice, and they should do it.
Totally.
Even as a seller, anytime you can make a good inspection, take
My
the little
favorite-
extra step to do it.
Yeah. My favorite is the anti-tip oven.
Oh yeah.
Every home in America is supposed to have an oven that is bolted to the wall, because if there's a child in the house and that child stands on the oven door while it's open, which if they do, you have a different problem, the oven can fall on them.
There's
so here,
always the same story. You just cook cookies on the stove. You took them out of the oven. Tommy runs up and steps on the oven door to get the cookies. And it's
poor Tommy. Now, I agree that this is a safety issue,
It really is.
but it shows up, again, as a red flag, fire safety, child safety issue. And
a
it's just a
hazard.
daunting message for buyers to get. So that one pops up on 99.9%
Mm-hmm.
of my inspection reports.
More common in older homes, missing GFCI protected outlets near water sources. So
I
this is
had
in
a
your kitchen
deal
and bath.
almost fall apart because of a GFCI outlet. The buyer didn't understand what that meant, and the inspector made it sound like such a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
GFCI outlets are supposed to be within 15 feet of any water source. So you're going to have your kitchens and your bathrooms have GFCI outlets.
Outdoor outlets too.
Outdoor outlets
near
as
hose
well.
bibs.
Yep. that essentially means that if water touches it, it trips. It's those outlets that have the reset button on them.
Yeah, it's like when you're using the hair dryer and then
Yeah.
it kicks out on you and you're like, what the heck? And you're like pressing those buttons until
it's
it works.
just that, yeah.
That's your GFCI protected outlet. So if you throw your hair dryer in the sink full of water, it's going to trigger the circuit to pop. And so you avoid all the hazards that come along with that.
And that's not an expensive fix. That's a $40 fix at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Don't cancel a contract over not having a properly run GFCI outlet. Please don't cancel a contract for that.
What else do you see?
I think those are the big ones that I think literally show up on every single inspection report. There's a lot of other things that kind of pop up that are more serious. Anything to do with structural, anything to do with old electrical, anything to do with windows, roofing. Those are what I think buyers should be focusing on. The inspection is there to make sure that there's no safety issues in your house. It's not there to say there's a crack in the drywall, I need that fixed. And I think that some buyers have the misconception that they should have a house that's brand spanking new. You're not buying new construction. If you are buying new construction, fine, expect that. But if you're not buying new construction, you're buying a house that has faults and issues. That is baked into the sale price. That is not what an inspection is for.
It's basically a bill of health on the home that you're buying. I mean, anyone that walks to the doctor, you're going to get your bill of health. There are going to be some things that you need to work on and improve on. That doesn't mean you just scrap yourself as dead because, you have a few things to work on. Same as your house. You are buying it the way it is. It's been lived in more than likely. And some of these are just the joys of being a homeowner. You do these little updates, you fix these things, and it's giving you full disclosure, which is why you have a home inspection. Disclosure is everything. The more you know, the more informed you are, the better of a buyer you are because you have more insight. And so going into this, what do I have to do to make this safe really at the end of the day?
And that's why homeowners should have an inspection on their own home every few years anyway. It's like a physical. It's like an annual physical.
Yeah.
Just go check out and make sure your home is in good condition.
What's another one I see too is dirty furnace filters.
That is actually a fire hazard, a pretty bad one.
Yes, and it can contribute to not only poor air quality, but it puts a lot of strain on your furnace.
Totally. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I think that's all we got time for today.
We thank you for everyone who contributed questions for today.
Like, comment, share.
Give us more to talk about.
If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments below. Let us know, and we'll try and get answers for you.
Thanks for tuning in today to Real Talk.
Dun, 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 dun. That was a long one.
Oh, yeah. Water.
Yeah. Oh, that was still going.